desert, not diving with Scuba.
Just before we get into this week's episode, a word from our sponsor. AC55ID is the fastest growing electronic music marketplace. Whether you're buying music, selling music, listening to music, AC55ID.com is the place to be. Streaming rates are 1 cent per stream on the platform, and you can also listen to podcasts over there, and podcasters also get paid 1 cent per stream. That is completely unprecedented in podcasting and a good reason to be over there in of itself. They also have their own pressing plant, so if you're doing vinyl, if you want to get into doing vinyl, they can help you with that. They can fulfill fan-powered orders on demand over at AC55ID.com. They can press vinyl on demand. That's pretty incredible too. For labels and artists selling on the platform, there is 0% commission. You keep 100% of your sales on AC55ID. There is a monthly fee, but as a viewer of Music Not Diving, they're offering 6 months off. So 6 month free use of the platform when you use the code SCUBA6 when you sign up. So yeah, this is pretty great, isn't it? Head over to ac55id.com to check them out.
Brought to you by AC55ID.
Welcome to the show. I'm Scuba. This is Music Not Diving. Okay, on the show this week, we are stepping slightly outside of our comfort zone. Those of you who've been following us since when we were an audio-only podcast and not a diving podcast, you guys will know that we've historically had quite a wide range of guests on from the world of music. So not just musicians, not just DJs. We've had PRs, we've had promoters, we've had the occasional writer on the show. And this week on Music Not Diving, we are continuing that tradition. So it's Emma Marshall. She has written an extremely interesting book called Music is Medicine. She runs a company called Movement is Medicine. And this is the intersection between, I suppose, wellness, health, music, and repetitive beats, specifically repetitive beats. So we get deep into the neuroscience behind why repetitive rhythms are, I guess, important to us as a species in this episode. This is extremely interesting stuff. Just the kind of thing I like having on to break up, the kind of DJ stuff, which is, DJs are all right, but you know what I mean. Anyway, Emma is, like I said, extremely interesting. She's a PhD student. She's got a deep well of knowledge to draw upon, a really interesting backstory too, which we get into in detail. So this is a good one, basically. This is someone who is doing really interesting work and just the perfect person to have on Music Not Diving. So just before we get into it, a reminder that you can support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/scubaofficial. The links are in the show notes. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. That's the other thing we'd love you to do. Tell your friends, this is the podcast that you should be listening to if you're not already listening to it. So yeah, that's about it, I think. So without further delay, let's head over to the studio and talk to Emma Marshall. Emma Marshall, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hi, nice to meet you.
And
Thanks
you.
for having me.
Absolutely, thanks for coming on. Why don't you, I don't always do this, but I think in this case it will be useful. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit to the audience? Tell everyone who you are and why you're here, perhaps.
Yeah, so my name's Emma Marshall. I am the founder of MIM HQ. So it's a platform that combines electronic music, dance, movement, and science to give people a well-rounded education as to why we love electronic music so much.
Right.
And I'm a PhD researcher. So my PhD is on electronic music being used as medicine.
Right.
So I'm...
That was on my list of questions actually to ask you. Carry on.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a big task because I'm like, all right, I want to really shift the narrative around electronic music because I think a lot of people immediately just assume drugs and alcohol and that's the main association narrative. And I'm like, no, it's not that. There's loads of biochemical reasons and physiological reasons why we love electronic music so much. And that's just one kind of part of it. And there's so much more going on. And that's really what I want to prove with this research, basically.
Right. Okay. Yeah. You have a book which is sitting there. When is it out?
In the next week or so. Yeah,
right.
I'm just waiting on the next couple of edits just to piece it all together. But
it's all happening. Yeah, great. So I've read it in the last 24 hours. Yeah. So one of the things I've learned doing a podcast is it's possible to read a book in 24 hours. I didn't think it was possible for that, but it actually turns out that it is. So yeah, lots of questions to ask you about. It's a super interesting piece of work, I have to say.
Thank you.
You have an interesting personal story, which is basically the centerpiece of the book, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
So why don't you tell that, or give us the executive. Sorry, actually, you can go into as much detail as you want. Actually, we are a long form podcast, so please take the floor.
I'll give you an overall synopsis, otherwise we'll be here forever. But so I worked in the music industry for many years, electronic music. Before that, I was just a raver, and then I managed to find myself a job. And
what kind of a raver were you? Sorry to interrupt you immediately, but
so started off drum and bass was my first love, and then garage, grime, into house. Like that was kind of my progression more so. But anything that fitted under the umbrella of electronic music, I was very open to. That was me in my youth exploring, like sound wise, like what made sense for me. And yeah, drum and bass would definitely be my first love, I think. Okay. But I sort of said to my mum, like, I want to work in the industry and I want to work in raving, and she thought I was mental. And because I'm not a musician or a DJ.
Right. Okay.
So obviously when you say I want to work in the industry, people assume, oh, you want to be a DJ. I wasn't a DJ, I just love dancing. So I had a friend at the time who I just met through raves, who was working at a festival. He was like, oh, you're really personable, you like people, come and do artist liaison. Did that, and I was like, what's the job? And he was like, you just chat to people. I was like, oh, okay. And so I did that.
Artist liaison, that is an ill-defined role, isn't it? Like
you have to be organised and friendly, and that's it. Right. So I ticked the boxes, and then I was working actually in Nettle House, just up the road, and he was like, oh, NGE is in here and they're looking for an intern. And I was like, okay, cool. So applied for that, and then met my boss at a festival. And so it kind of all just happened really naturally and organically. Worked at NGE for a couple of years, got loads of opportunities with that. Did like a festival with Damien Lazarus in Mexico. Was
Damien has been on the show actually. So this is the year zero.
Day zero.
Day zero.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't know if it was the first one he did. I think it might have been like the second or third.
I've never been to that. It sounds pretty amazing.
Oh, it was unbelievable. It was like that, or however many people, I can't remember the cap now, but they had it on this like pyramid. So now they do it deep in the jungle, I think, but he found this abandoned like theme park, I think, or something, and they had this pyramid. So he had these DJs playing on this pyramid. It was absolutely unbelievable. So yeah, when I worked at that, fell in love with Mexico then and there, and then
right, Mexico is a central character in the book, actually.
It is. That's why I'm bringing it up now.
Sure, okay.
That was where I fell in love, because before that I'd always wanted to go to Mexico. It was just like an inner thing. It's a country I'd always wanted to visit for no apparent reason. Okay. But that was the first time that I was able to go there. And so came back, worked at NGE, and then ended up leaving NGE and went over to CAA, where I was working with Maria May. So on Team Disco, doing a lot of electronic music still. And I very quickly just realised...
Let me just ask you, we've never had a booking agent on the show, although we have one coming up, I have to say. I'm not going to say who it is, but CAA, that's like a global industry. Well, it's an industry leader, right? It's one of the kind of... I mean, some people might describe it as the Death Star. That might be going a little bit far, but what was it like working at CAA?
It's everything that you think a corporate machine is.
Right, so it is the Death Star.
It's very, very big. It's a lot of moving parts, but I think I learned so much there, more now that I obviously can reflect on my time there rather than being in it. I learned so much about business, which I'm super grateful for, because now I obviously run my own. Right. And it very much is all about transferable skills. The issue for me was that I'm very logical and creative at the same time. I can really flip from one to the other quite easily. Okay. And I need both. And if I don't have both, I get so bored. Okay. So I was kind of hitting a lot of targets within a very short amount of time. So Maria was always so supportive of that and trying to push me forward into being able to do, more. But of course, with policies and stuff like that, it's not as easy as a boutique agency, for example.
Sure, yeah.
So I also just was really not in the zone of wanting to be an agent. I really quickly realised, I was like, this isn't for me, I don't think. Like,
it takes a particular kind of person to be a booking agent.
Definitely. And also just somebody that really is okay with just doing contracts and sales and spreadsheets. And I just... not me at all. Right. So I was like, I can do it, but it's not me. And so there was so much there in regards to, A&Ring and finding new talent and going to live shows. That's what I loved. Yeah. And it was like, well, then why are you doing all this other stuff? Right. So left there with no actual job. I was just like, I'm just done. I don't know what I'm going to do. But I went into freelance, and so consulted for people like Julia Danuga, and I was working at this like streetwear startup as a consultant, like bringing in music to that. Then I went over and started working with Shy FX. So I did some work with Shy on his management team at the time, and it was when he was like putting everything into his label Culture. So it was a really great project to work on, like super exciting. And also as a drum and bass girl, like come on, that's like top tier, like number one.
Absolutely.
And I got it because I think I've been in the scene for that many years and stuff, so that was cool. Then I went over to work with Genius for a while, who ran Rinse, and worked with Heartless Crew, Target. Then I went over to Sony and was like a creative consultant, basically. So my job at Sony was working for their creative agency. It wasn't working for the label.
Okay. What is a creative consultant at Sony?
My job
Lots of people are going to be asking themselves that question, right?
What do you do? Yeah, my job literally was to come up with ideas. So my job was essentially working within each of the kind of labels if they wanted to do anything outside traditional marketing norms. Okay. So I would come up with ideas. This is like 2018, so influencer marketing, it wasn't as huge as it is now, but it was still that was going on. So we were looking at how to bring in like that kind of stuff, and main thing I was working on was actually a documentary. So I was working on a documentary with Risky Roads, who was the pioneer of video and grime. So it was his story,
right?
So that was my main
I remember
project.
those DVDs.
The Risky Roads DVDs. So working with Rini on putting together this documentary telling his story, which is a very interesting story because I don't know if you know, he's a black cab driver.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that was what he ended up doing. He didn't stay in the kind of video circuit like GRM or Link Up. He ended up going
he did the knowledge.
Yeah, he did the knowledge.
Amazing.
So we were like, we've got this guy that's got all this archive footage from the entirety of every single grime artist who is now like a superstar. Literally.
I mean, they are incredible, those things. Like, that's where the footage of the famous footage of Dizzy and Wiley in that whatever it is, like seemingly, I don't know, you know, at the back of some council estate somewhere is from one of those DVDs. Right, absolutely. That's one of those, isn't it? And so many legendary pieces of footage. I mean, incredible, really.
Absolutely. So we were putting together his archive, basically, but then telling his story up to the present day, bringing his nan in, who is her own superstar now. Like, she's got her own stuff going on. So, it was a whole build. And then, so that was my career. And then whilst this was all going on, I was getting really weird health problems. So my career was doing really well, but I was in and out of hospital like all the time with really weird stuff. And it started in 2015. That was when my body kind of started to shut down. So I had a really severe kidney infection and then was hospitalised, had to have like a catheter because I couldn't pee because my bladder was so inflamed. And they were just like, we don't know what this is from. And then 2 weeks later, I got tripped up down the road from here and broke my wrist. And so it was, you know, that happens, it is what it is. But the issue is that about 3 or 4 days after I'd had the cast on, everything should have been settling down and the pain was getting more intense. And after about 2 weeks, I could not physically move. Like, I was in agony. They kept obviously saying like, oh, you're fine. It's just you've broken your arm. And I was like, I've broken my arm before because when I was younger, I played football. So...
You were captain of England's schoolgirls or something?
I was captain of Middlesex County.
Okay.
And I also played for Tottenham ladies. Right. So, this is before women's football was like a thing.
I mean, I have to say, when I first read that sentence, I was like, I thought it says you had been internationally captaining the professional women's football team, but
so it was a decent level, but it was a hobby.
I mean, it has completely changed now, right?
Totally, it's a whole new arena. My dad is still holding on to that. It's like, you could have made it.
Right.
Yeah, I'm like, well, I've written a book, so
every
it's fine.
Dad's dream. It's not much better to be a professional footballer than
100%, whether you're a boy or a girl doesn't matter. So I mean, football was like a real big part of my life, but also I definitely had my injuries in that time. So when I broke my arm this time, I just honestly didn't think anything of it. So I knew something was wrong when it was obviously getting worse. And then, it got so debilitating that I had to move back to my mum and dad's. I couldn't eat, move, wash myself. Like, I was basically like paralyzed in this one position, where if I moved, it felt like somebody was like stabbing me with fire. So
so I've had sciatic nerve problems over the last few years, and the pain that you get when you've got serious like nerve issues, because that kind of manifests itself down your legs.
Exactly.
It literally feels like someone's smashing you in with a baseball bat.
Yeah.
Like I mean, it's that's not even a slight exaggeration.
No.
It really does. Like that kind of stuff is unimaginable.
Absolutely. And I think that if you've had nerve issues, you will understand that type of pain.
Yeah.
If you've not, you're like, oh, it's just a bit
how
of pain.
bad could it be, right?
It's agony.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I had to move back to this is when I was working at CAA. And this is the thing, like, you're working at this huge company and I'm worried about getting fired, even though I haven't done anything wrong per se, but it's like, I'm having all this time off, you know?
Yeah.
So
not good, right?
No.
Yeah.
Well, people are still touring.
Yeah, right.
So,
and the music industry is particularly brutal like that, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot is asked, I think, of staff in the various different areas, and probably too much, to be honest, and as you say. You know.
an artist.
Yeah.
That's-
Well, yeah, I
that's the
mean,
thing.
as an artist, like, you know, you're living the dream and stuff, so you have to suck it up to a certain extent. I realize that's a slightly toxic way of looking at it, but, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of changes I think that are needed across the board.
We're gonna get into this. Carry on.
So that was all going on, and then eventually I got diagnosed with something called CRPS, which is complex regional pain syndrome, which they still don't know a lot about. It's quite a relatively new concept. They see it a lot in like veterans.
Okay.
So they think that there's like a massive link to physical trauma, where the nerves and your nervous system basically go into a state of hyperactivity, which then send these like severe pain signals. That it's a bit similar to phantom limb.
Okay.
So when people have amputations, they still think that they've got their leg and then it hurts, etc. It's a similar concept, except obviously you still have the limb,
yeah.
but
It's still there,
it's like
yeah.
nothing's wrong. Like I'm not in pain, I've not banged it. And the pain is just unimaginable. So yeah, that really like disabled me for a long time. And there was no real treatment plan. So I just started smoking loads of hash because I was just like, cool, this is my way of medicating. I'm not taking the opioids, which was what they were trying to do.
Really?
Yeah, they were just trying to opioid me up and I was just off my nut. And
Yeah, then there's a lot in the book. This is the first chapter of the book. This is basically.
Yeah.
There's a lot in there about conventional medicine not doing the job. And I'd say, as a podcaster, it's great to finally be able to stick it into conventional medicine. I don't think you are a proper podcast until you cover alternative medicine properly. So here we are, finally doing it. But yeah, I mean, it sounds awful, to be honest,
it was
and really
intense.
difficult to deal with. And like you say, if you're being prescribed that kind of stuff, I mean, and actually exactly the same as stuff I had with slip disc, which turned into sciatic nerve stuff. Like, yeah, they just basically say this will make you feel better, right? But it's not the kind of feeling better that is, sustainable, right?
that's the word. It's not sustainable. In my head, I was like, so you're expecting me to just live like this?
Yeah.
For how long? What's the timeline? There was just no end goal. It was just, well, we can just keep giving you tramadol. And I was like, well, that's not an answer. Like,
Do you like tramadol?
yeah, everyone. I think for the first week, I was like, oh, this is nice.
This is
and then
great.
after that, I was like, no, I can't function. Like, it's too much. So got into more kind of looking at that point anyway about holistic treatments and alternative stuff, and found a really good physio. I got some like cannabis oil. He would like do physio on me. He was also really not sure as to like why the inflammation wasn't going away, because he was, manipulating it into a certain position, blah, blah, blah. So it was just like trial and error, and it never fully went away. It was just managed a lot better with cannabinoids and like holistic kind of body work, basically. So thought that was the end of my awful year, booked to go to Ibiza in the September because that was like the first 6 months of the year. It was just hospital.
Sure.
And then the week I was meant to be going to Ibiza, I had to go to hospital for a burst appendix.
Oh, no.
And it was just this, I literally was just like, I cannot believe this.
Yeah.
So I went to the doctors, as in the GP, after all of this had happened, because I just felt broken. And he was like, well, we think you're depressed. And I was like, obviously I'm depressed.
Right.
Like, what if I wasn't depressed, I'd be really concerned at
Right, yeah.
my human state. But there was no, oh, we can do this or we can do that. It was just, here's some antidepressants kind of thing. So for me, again, that just wasn't the answer. And I don't know whether it was like intuition or whether it's subconsciously, like I just was programmed like that. But I just didn't believe that here's a pill and that's it.
Right.
So I went into the more holistic thing from there anyway. Like I completely gave up alcohol, changed my diet to whole foods. I think at that point I must have given up meat for no apparent reason. I just was like, that's health apparently,
Sure.
with no real research. And then I was doing a lot of like acupuncture and reflexology and like other body things. And I, over time, definitely recovered from this whole year. But at the same time...
Let me just ask you before you go on, of those, what might be considered to be alternative therapies that you tried, what was the best thing? Or what were the ones that actually seemed to make a difference?
I love Chinese medicine the most. I think that Chinese medicine for me makes even logically the most sense. Like the nervous system is an electrical circuit. So because it's based around your energy meridians, you can literally apply that to your nervous system shooting out electrical signals. Right. So I think for me, like it's not necessarily just acupuncture. I'm very, I do well with a lot of like physical body work, like massage. So there's a guy actually that I started to see more recently that it wasn't during this time. I wish if I'd have found him during this time, I would have been fine probably because my body would have recovered. But he does this thing called tweener, and it's this thing that they do in China. So in Chinese hospitals, for example, they don't do physio, they do tweener. And it's basically where they twist the fascia and they release the fascia in a certain way and manipulate the body in a certain way that's also skeletal, so that everything kind of aligns back into where it should be, whether it's energy, whether it's your spine, etc. And I think that stuff is absolutely, that's what works. Right. So at the time, I think if I'd have known that now, I would have been all right. But at the time, yeah, as I said, I don't think any of them worked as a cure as such. I think that they maybe offered relief. And I think that I didn't also understand the body at that point. I was very much in the zone of like, you know, I didn't basically realize how much trauma I'd been through. Like that year itself was traumatic in many ways. And I just was like, okay, now back to it. And there was no processing like at all. So I don't feel like I ever fully recovered from that year based upon the fact that things were still lingering. I hadn't dealt with the emotional stuff. Like I went back to work and then, you know, whatever. And so, yeah, it got to 2018 and that's when I found out I was pregnant. And so, this is in the book as well. So yeah, found out I was pregnant, was still not in like good health and was just like, I just don't think that I can raise a child right now. Like I'm not in the zone to do that. Decided to get a termination. It went wrong. It was like the worst case scenario that could have happened. And it just was like one thing after the other of like negligence. And it literally just could not have gone any worse basically. And so my body just shut down from there because I think that because I'd already had stuff that wasn't processed and my system wasn't strong still, and I was still in and out of hospital having various different tests and treatments, especially for the CRPS stuff.
Yeah, so that was
it was still going on.
Yeah, okay.
All of this was still going on. And I was managing a lot on my own, and I would never necessarily even tell anyone that anything was wrong or going on. It just kind of became part of my lifestyle. So when this happened and my body started to genuinely like collapse, I was like, no, something's really wrong. And I think that because I'd been through all this other stuff, people would be like, oh, you'll be, you're all right. And I was like, no.
Yeah, people like to say that, don't they?
Yeah. I was like, no, this time, like something's really not okay. And, even just pregnancy, it messes with your hormones, like everything goes out of whack, basically. And so I think by the September, that happened in like the June. So by like the September, I was like, I'm going to die. Like, I feel like I'm going to drop dead. Yeah. And no one was really taking it seriously. They thought I had, not they thought, I was diagnosed with PTSD from all of it. There was this kind of like, you definitely have PTSD now. So they thought that
just keep piling it on.
Literally.
Right? Yeah.
So everyone around me, friends, family, they were just like, you've got a lot going on. You've got PTSD or whatever. And I'm just like, no, physically, there is something wrong. You're not listening. And I met this guy, actually, it was Risky Road's dad, Kevin, he's a counsellor. And Rooney was like, you should chat to my dad. And I did. And he was like, yes, you've had a lot mentally, but physically there's definitely something going on. And I think I just needed that one validation from someone to be like, I need to explore what this could be. At this point, I had no concept of trauma. There wasn't even a word. I didn't, PTSD, sure, but I was like, I can logically understand that traumatic incident has made me feel X, rather than looking at an accumulation of how the body's holding on to stuff.
Sure.
So I was basically just like, I wasn't going out. I was no longer socializing. I was just in my room crying to like Jamie Woon albums. Like that was literally all I was doing. And
It's a reasonable thing to put on if you're going to cry.
absolutely,
Right.
Jamie Woon. Oh, thank God for him. And you know, the place that would have definitely have helped me have processed all of this stuff would have been the dance floor, and I just stopped.
Right.
So I went into functional medicine, which for me was like the logical step from Western. You're still working with doctors. So functional medicine is doctors that have essentially left traditional Western healthcare to look at things more holistically.
Okay.
They, unfortunately, in my opinion, are still, I think it's changing now, but I think at the time that I was entering into it, they were still obsessed with everything, toxins and Lyme disease, and it's a bacteria, and there's going to be something external still that's trying to kill you. And I was like, okay, cool. So what are you trying to say? And they were like, yeah, we think you've got Lyme disease, and also you've been poisoned by black mold in your house. And I live in London, so there's definitely black mold in my house. You know, it's just, we live in a very damp city.
Sure.
And so I could, that to me was like, there's a logic there. Like
Yeah, it's plausible.
That's plausible.
Yeah.
The Lyme disease, I was like, okay, sure.
Right.
Whatever. So a friend of mine stepped in, and she was like, I think you need to stop everything, because I was so overwhelmed with the fact that the NHS weren't able to help, and I was basically in functional medicine, which costs £500 for an appointment.
Right.
No treatment yet, just appointments. And then testing is over £1,000. And like, I was just like, I'm drowning. And physically, I'm just obviously going to collapse. So she stepped in and did a GoFundMe, and the thing was like, you've been poisoned by black mold in your house, we think you might have Lyme disease, can people donate so that we can get treatment? And there was enough donations that I could get treatment at a hospital in Mexico. So this is where Mexico comes back in.
Yeah, right, okay.
And Mexico, I believe in coincidences, I believe in, you know, fate and all these things. And I was like, of course it's in Mexico.
Sure.
So ended up going to this hospital, was admitted. They treated me for Lyme and mold, but then they were like, we don't think you've got either of those. Like, we think that the mold, yes, everyone's kind of got toxins in their system, their body's processing, whatever. But for the symptoms that you're having, we're not sure what's really going on, but we know it's like neurological, we know it's immune, and we know it's endocrine. But again, they didn't sit down, even with my medical history, and go, this is quite a lot of trauma. Like, no one did it.
Right.
So it was just more treatment. And that treatment was mad. It was like,
Right.
So I had to have this thing called hyperthermia. So hyperthermia.
Yeah, this stuck
Yeah.
out in the text. Absolutely. Explain that.
So, oh, mate, honestly.
Yeah.
So you're basically put into an induced coma. And then,
I mean, that's
yeah.
just enough, isn't it?
Which are just like, okay. And then they heat your body up in this like specialized machine to 109 degrees to reboot your immune system with like this very extreme temperature. Crazy dangerous and experimental. But I was like, yeah, sure, do what you need to do.
Sure.
When you're desperate, you're just saying yes. And you're also trusting these people, obviously. So yeah, had that done twice in the space of 3.5 weeks. And then I had this thing called ozone
This is in Mexico.
in Mexico.
So you're there on your own.
I was on my own, but it got so bad because I started having seizures and I couldn't walk. So
So where were you? Were you in hospital?
in this hospital, to be fair, the hospital is a private hospital, right? It's not like Whittington. It's a
right.
private hospital. So you're in a ward, but
We support the NHS on this.
we
podcast,
love the
by way.
NHS. We actually do love the NHS, and I am going to come back to this. It's got its place. But yeah, you're in a ward, but actually the hospital is actually designed almost like a hotel. So the
Right.
ward is across 2 floors of the hotel, and then you have like a bedroom, but that's all linked up to if you press a button if they need to come, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was like really beautiful, like on where it was like on this cliff in the just below Tijuana.
Oh, right. Nice.
So people go there for all sorts of diseases, like a lot of cancer patients are there. And they do have like genuinely really good results with a lot of things, because it is this holistic thing. For someone like myself who has a mystery illness,
Right.
it's not so much like you're just a guinea pig. You could be getting that treatment, you know, anywhere really. but yeah, there's a lot of people that have been told like stage 4 cancer, nothing we can do in Western medicine. They go to this hospital and then suddenly they're in remission. Like they do have amazing results and stuff. Yeah, for me, it kind of just made me worse.
Really?
So yeah, they kept saying to me like, you know, it's a marathon. Like your health is going to have to be put back together in bit by bit. And I was like, but you don't even know what's wrong with me. Like, so I don't know what you want me to say.
It's like a Kafka novel.
Absolutely.
Genuinely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also just mad confusing because you've got people going like, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't know. But like, yeah, it got really bad. Like my dad had to spend like thousands on flying out because I literally lost the ability to walk. Yeah. And at that point I was like, even though we don't have that kind of money, like I need somebody to come out. We found it somehow. Yeah, right. So he came out for like 5 days and then he had to leave again. And then I was left, I left hospital after 3.5 weeks because by this point as well, the bill, 30 grand. Yeah. It's like, even if I wanted to stay, not possible. Yeah. So I ended up staying in LA just because I was like, well, if anything does really seriously go wrong, like I can go back down there quite easily. It's just across the border. And I thought, well, I know people in LA, like my network is there as well. So I thought that was a good place for me to be. Never felt so lonely and isolated in my whole entire life. Really? I was just like, get me out of here. So I actually flew back down to Mexico, but I went down to the side that I'd been at before. So I was in Tulum. I've been going to Tulum for like since the Damien thing, like every year up until that point anyway. So I knew the town, I knew people there. So I was like, cool, I'm going to be here. And that's when I went into like the shaman's journey. And so that's where the plant medicines come in.
Yeah, so you've done over 100 ceremonies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In total, yeah, like a lot of ceremony. Kambo was the main thing, which is the frog poison.
Okay, can you explain this to our audience?
Yeah, so Kambo is a poison of a frog from the Amazon that they basically milk. And then they have got all these peptides in the secretion that match a lot of the peptides in the human body. So it's been proven to be like antibacterial, antiviral, anti-cancer, anti-everything. Yeah. So it's used for various reasons medically now. But in the Amazon, it's used for, all sorts of stuff medically, yes, but also for when the tribe are going out to hunt, like the men do it as a ceremony before they go out to hunt so that they're very clear because it completely like resets everything.
What's it like?
Mate, it's so mad. It's like, so they basically they burn 2 holes in your arm. I've got scars all over my arm from doing so many of these things. But they basically burn 2 holes in your arm with like incense to take off the first layer because they don't want to, it's not to remove, like to go down to the blood or anything like that. It's to get the lymph visible. Yeah. They apply the poison and then all I can describe it as is this like rush where it goes from your feet all the way up. You can literally feel it going through your system. It's mad. And it goes all the way up from the feet to the top of the head and then back down into the stomach and then you puke your guts up.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, you just are violently sick. And so it's trying to you secrete a lot from the liver. There's a lot of bile that comes up and that's basically what you're trying to do. But in like more traditional ceremony, they believe it's not just physical things that you're working with, it's also energetic. So getting rid of even demons, that kind of stuff. So it's this whole process, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And it was for a long time the one thing that made me feel better.
Is it at all analogous to ayahuasca in the way that you kind of...
It's not hallucinogenic.
No,
there's no hallucinogen there. That's also why I did it, because I was also like, I'm definitely mentally unstable. There's no way ayahuasca is something that I should be doing right now. I did do it eventually, but Kambo was my first kind of port of call to do this like very physical cleanse. And I must have done up to like 100 ceremonies, and some of them were amazing and some of them I don't know how I'm alive, like truly. Some too much poison, wrong shaman, shamans that call in themselves shamans that are just random people from random countries.
Not really regulated.
Not safe. Like if you want to do this, do it. I cannot recommend it more highly, but do it with the right people, like seriously. And I think that the people that are the right people are the indigenous people, personally. It's like being passed down that knowledge through lineage is essential. You're not just some random bloke from Ibiza that's like, oh, I'm a shaman now, which is happening a lot.
Yeah.
Which is terrifying.
Cast out on random blokes from Ibiza, but probably not all of them are completely legit.
No, it's happening all over the world, and it's a really weird time that we're in, because it's like these medicines are really strong.
Right.
Like, and if you don't have this training, which goes on for years in lineage and in indigenous communities, that we have to have some respect for. You can't just go, oh, I'm just going to do that now because I did a ceremony. It's like, that's not, no, that's not how things, work. So anyway, that's an opinion. But yeah, I really went into that shamanic thing of, this is going to be my cure, right? Okay. It wasn't. It was just a lot of learning, and it was a lot of time to understand the connection between the mind and the body, which I think is really important to understand in any health journey. Like, your mind and your body are completely connected. They are not separate, and things are going to have an impact vice versa. Some people are going to present more with their mind, and some people are going to present more physically. You're having symptoms of the whole body, right? And that was really helpful for me, because I was like, I get it now. I get why my body is in this position. I think I'm really traumatized. Right. And but I was still on a lot of medication, like a lot of medication. It was almost like being on natural chemotherapy is the best way to explain it. It was like a lot of herbs that are like designed to kill. So if they're killing all your good stuff, they're also killing all your bad stuff. And I was on these treatment protocols for like a year, and I was getting sicker and sicker. I'd come back to the UK. My mum and dad, I grew up in North London. They'd left North London. So I went and lived with them in this like middle of nowhere village that they moved to in Suffolk that I just hated so much. And it was so isolating. I was super ill, I had no friends around me, and they were also losing their minds because they were like, what is going on? Right. And it was just a really weird time. And but during that time I met this woman called Rachel, who I talk about in the book as well, who was a homeopath. And she was the one that said, she was like, you're traumatized physically. That's what's going on. Your nervous system is in hypervigilance. That's why everything's getting worse, because by this point my symptoms were I could only eat 10 foods. So I was eating basically boiled chicken with some 9 vegetables, like that was it. I just was such a mess, honestly. Half my hair had fallen out. I just was so depressed beyond belief, obviously. Like,
what year are we in here?
We're in Lao 2019.
Okay.
Yeah, end of 2019. Yeah. And it was just the rock bottom.
Yeah.
And so that's when I met this woman. And we sat in this shed, and she was just like, yeah, this is what's actually going on. And so I'm not going to give you treatment. I'm just going to try and settle your nervous system, basically. And then I was like, this adds up. Now I can understand why I'm not recovering. Because that was always confusing to me. I was like, I've done the treatment. They told me that to do this. It's not working. Right. She's like, you need to recover. So, because bear in mind, that's now like 5 years of medical intervention.
Yeah, right.
And intense.
Which in of itself is,
it's a lot. So, and some people have never been to the doctor,
yeah, right,
Yeah. So anyway, I ended up moving back to London just before COVID. My best friend gave me her flat, God bless her. Like, she was like, you need to have some time and space to recover.
Let me just ask you, I mean, symptomatically, this is, I mean, you've described periods where you literally couldn't walk. So things were sort of ebbing and flowing and on that side of things.
Totally.
Yeah. So and that was presumably pretty unpredictable.
100%. Like, these weird seizures would come and go, but they'd done the tests in terms of it wasn't a neurological, like it wasn't epileptic, for example. They were like, we don't know why it's actually now there's a diagnosis for it. It's called FND. Okay. It's like your body just goes into this shake, which is so interesting because this is what animals do to shake off trauma. Okay. So I think it's people, this is just a theory, I'm not a doctor. Sure. Yeah. But okay. People that shake off when you're going into these shakes, is your nervous system is overloaded. And I think that was what was going on with me, is that I was in this hospital environment. My system was so overloaded with stress that the only thing it knew to do was go into this biological shake that presents like a seizure. Right. And so it all just makes sense to me as to why my body reacted like that. The not walking stuff, that was a reaction to the treatment that I was having. So as soon as I stopped that treatment, that my knees went back down to normal. It was basically, how to explain it? It was like my knees, as in the fluid, ballooned to like triple the size. And then it was like wearing lead boots. So it was like I couldn't actually lift my leg up.
Okay.
So it was so weird. It's still even weird now, like to describe it, because it's like I don't actually know what that was. All I can say is that my legs were so swollen, and specifically my knee joint, that I literally couldn't walk. And then it would just go away. So
weird.
yeah,
Okay.
so weird. But also when you understand the inflammatory responses of the body, my body, I think, went into this severe inflammatory response to try and deal with what was going on with all these treatments. And I did actually have 2 infections. I had a bacterial infection and a viral infection. One was affecting my joints, so that's where that kind of made sense to me.
Yep.
And the other one was I had a case of pneumonia.
Okay.
So my body wasn't fighting it because I had no immune system. So all of it made sense, but it was just this protocol of just like trying to work out like what to do next and what to do first. Sure. So yeah, that was a whole thing. So by the time we're in 2020, I'm now in that zone where I've basically thrown away everything, every medication, herb, all of it. I'm like, I'm not taking it anymore. And this is where the movement stuff comes in, and the dance and the music. This is here. So moved into my friend's flat in Ladbroke Grove. She had moved abroad, so she was like just rest basically, while she figure life out again. And then COVID hit, right? And I should have had physio, I should have had therapy, I should have had all these things.
Right, of course.
There was nothing for anyone. So I woke up one day, and I mean I was probably spiritual before this happened, but after this all happened, like, you find God, you just do. Like, I think it's a byproduct.
I was going to bring this up, but the first person in the acknowledgement is God.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's like I can't go through all of this without finding connection to God. It doesn't make any sense to me. And that was my piece, is finding connection to God in some way, shape or form. Like, bad stuff can happen, it will happen. You know, it's about how we continue in life, with a set of values, I guess, and trust that it's okay. Like, you know, what is going to happen will happen, but it's okay, and you will be okay. And that was all I was basically clinging on to. It was this like, this has all got to make sense somehow, you know? Like, I had this really fun career, I had this really great life, I've had so many beautiful experiences, I know so many people, and yet now I'm in this like isolated hole, sick, with no prospects and no enjoyment in my life. Like, to me, I've lost everything, right? And so I had to find God, basically. And in this moment was
definitely
when...
going to clip that bit up for them.
Yeah, it was a good soundbite. Yeah. So yeah, it was in this moment that I basically was in bed. COVID had obviously hit. For me personally, I wasn't particularly affected by COVID as a global pandemic, in the regard of I've just been through 2 years of madness. Yeah, right.
It didn't really change your life much
Not at all. Like, I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I was probably dealing with it very differently to other people. And I was also like, I think that we need to stop panicking, because there was some part of me that was also just like, this has gone too far for people robbing toilet roll. Do you know what I mean? It was just all a bit mad. So
yeah, people definitely lost their minds for a moment.
I was like, nah, I can't subscribe to this like fear narrative. And if I probably did, I probably would have genuinely lost my mind, because it's just like, I've already been through 2 years of hell. So I was like, I'm not doing that. So what can I actually do for myself? And like, I think that when we talk about movement and we talk about well-being, people automatically now go yoga. It's not my thing. Like, never really has been. Don't get me wrong, stretch, I like that. But yoga as a concept, it's just not for me. So I've tried it, and I was like, I can't, no, it's still not hitting.
It's not for everyone.
Yeah, it's not for everyone. And so I was like, well, what can I do? And this voice was just like, get up and put some music on and move. And that's what I mean by the voice of God. It was just very like, get up, do this and do this. Okay. Because it wasn't my voice. It wasn't my like internal narrator.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, okay. And then, you know, you make every excuse.
Well, at least he was telling you to do something positive.
Totally.
Sometimes that voice gets people to do other things.
100%. And that's why I think it's the voice of God versus some other weird spirit or issue.
Yes.
As
another
such.
person who's in that book.
Absolutely. So, I woke up put the music on and just started dancing. I remember it was My Jane Cole's, that's the tune I went to. What
Yeah,
They
right.
Say.
That's what you said in the book.
Yeah, What They Say. It was, I don't know why. I just think it's so rhythmic that naturally, it's a tune that I've loved for years. Like I love Maya, you know, and I was just like, right, cool. I'm going to move to this and just see how my body does. Because I had not been moving. Like I was very much bedbound a lot of the time. And yeah, and I just was like, okay, this is starting to make me feel less pain and it's starting to make me feel less sad. It's like, cool. So then, yeah, I started to do it every single day, like at least one tune. Sometimes it'd be longer, sometimes it'd be like 20 minutes and sometimes it'd be one tune because my energy levels were low. But I did it every single day. And after like a month, I was like, this is actually working. Right. And then it started to like click into place, like all these things. I was like, dance floor is therapy, and I love raving because it made me feel like this, and it's a catharsis. And there was so many things that really clicked for me. And then that's when I also started putting it on Instagram as like, make sure you're dancing, shaking, blah, 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 blah. And it didn't become like a thing until the end of like 2020 when I decided to move back to Mexico. And so at that point I kind of got my life together a little bit and figured some stuff out. And I was like, I'm not doing another lockdown. Like, like everyone's already having a tough time. I'm not doing 3 years or more of this. Mexico was open. They did not take the pandemic the same way as we did. So yes, there was like, oh, you have to wear a mask in a supermarket, but it was like, yeah, you can go to the beach and go for dinner, like da-da. So a lot of people went to Mexico. I was one of them. Yeah. But I used the time to study and rest and recover. So my intention of being there was
Let me just
study.
jump in here because there was the whole plague raves thing, right, at this time. And quite a lot of that was in Mexico. I felt a bit sort of ambivalent about that in terms of like, it seemed a bit sort of sanctimonious the way that was covered, right? And it was a very negative piece of media, I was going to say manipulation of narrative, perhaps not. What did you, looking back on it, do you think that was at all fair? Was there anything in that? Like, what was was there any way, was the criticism in any way justified?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think that it depends on where you're coming at it from, what your belief systems are. I think that for me, I knew that I wanted to go back to somewhere I'd already lived, that was open, that I knew, and it made sense to me for personal reasons. I think that if there was a lot of people that were going there maybe with the wrong intentions, that was not how. You shouldn't be going to Cancun, for example, to just carry on doing spring break vibes. Like, that's not. Yeah.
Why else you'd go to Cancun, to be honest? But Gary.
For sure. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a spectrum of just like belief systems about where you sat with COVID.
Right.
Like for me, I was like, I know why I'm going back there for these reasons of I'm not doing another lockdown physically. I'm not doing it. I need to get some sun. I need to recover. And I think that when I went there and to see the types of people that were gathered there were all in the same boat, which was I'm not going to be dictated to by my government, whatever country they were from, that this is how we're living now. And that was very much across the board.
Yeah, and I think that's completely legit. And it kind of got spun into this kind of sort of libertarian caricature, didn't it? Which is just, I mean, anyway. Yeah. This is not something to get bogged down in, but Carry on.
I think it's just a lot of like-minded individuals that were very more so on that tip of, I've got there's a point that I will listen and there's a point where I will take my agency back, basically.
Yeah, which is, I think, fine.
Yeah, totally. And also the Mexicans were like lovely. Like they really... I just think Mexico, in terms of as a country, it's one of the most beautiful places, cultures, people, so friendly. And they were very grateful that people were still coming because for economy purposes.
That's what's kind of ignored, isn't it? Like it's the kind of that whole narrative was like, these kind of rich white people are going over and taking advantage of people. And maybe there's a grain of truth in that narrative, but like, it's so much more complex than that, 100%.
I think that at the end of the day, that's still going on regardless of COVID. I think that it's down to the individual person, and the intention and what you're doing and how you're implementing yourself into community. Are you going there for a holiday, which is then fine, 2 weeks, you're there to be in a hotel, for example, you don't have to integrate into community. If you're there to live, you have to give something back, and you have to integrate in a different way. So luckily that was where I sat in the people that I was with. It was like a real mix and blend of people from like Toronto, New York, a lot of people from Spain. Like, yeah, there was just a real mix and blend of people there that were in that same intention of just like integration into society, not extrapolate themselves kind of thing.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
That's all right. So went back to Mexico, and then when I was there, I was very much in that zone of I want to study tribes and how they use music and dance, because by this point as well, I had already made the connection between not just movement and dance, but also specifically the drum. It's the drum. It's not the other elements of production.
It's not melody, it's rhythm, right?
It's rhythm. So that was where my focus point went. It was to that side of, let me observe actually in person and do some study around how that's utilized in tribes, but also not just tribes, like indigenous teachings and ritual, and then apply that to rave culture.
So how much academic anthropology has been done on that in that area? And there must have been a bit, but like, I mean, how much of a area of study is it existing?
So there's this one guy who I do mention, who was, when I read his book, I was like, cool, I'm on the right path. He is called Bradford Keeney. He's a psychotherapist in his like 60s from the US who figured this out a long time ago, and he'd like gone to Brazil, this is all very normal study. So he went over to Africa, to Botswana, to live with the San people. And so his work is my point of reference for the anthropological side of things, because he's actually lived with them, and not just like for 5 minutes. He was there for 16 years.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
That's a decent stint, to be fair.
Absolutely, yeah, he did his time. And he is very much centered around like preserving their culture, like making sure that even though the modern era is obviously doing a lot, including those within those tribes, like that knowledge has to be preserved as it is. There cannot be any changes made. This is like 200,000-year-old words that have been spoken.
They are the sort of the oldest existing community, right? So it's still intact.
Absolutely. So they're what we would call like the original humans and like the hunter-gatherers. So they sit across like Botswana, Southern Africa, and the teaching is around trance dance, and it's just normal. So if somebody in the tribe is dealing with something, you light the fire, you play the drums, you say the prayers until they come back to normal.
Right.
And then, so for me, I'm like, cool, that's literally what we do at a rave, except for the fact that it's, behind this mask of hedonism, and people believe that because they've taken something, that's the euphoria, and it's not. And the reason that I found the San people the most interesting was because they don't take anything. It's not a psychedelic thing.
Right.
But they go...
Right, because in certain traditions,
yes,
they absolutely
do.
Right? Yeah.
And that's, part of the study. It's like, what traditions have the psychedelic influence and what traditions don't. And that's, for me, where the African traditions sat more... I was more interested in them because of there wasn't that use. It was just they're getting there with the drum. That's it. If you go to Brazil, that stuff has come over to Brazil because of the slave trade, and the teachings have been taken and then integrated with indigenous Brazilian traditions. Right. And then also Catholicism, actually. And there's like kind of this mix and blend of tradition now, but they also do use ayahuasca because Brazil is the Amazon, right? It's just really interesting to like look at how things have evolved, basically, but also where they've originated from, and, West African drum loops versus the South African sound versus Central African, Ethiopia. There's so much there. But at the same time, what my interest is in is how that then affects the body. And like, why is it that drum loop that makes people want to move so much? And how does that make them move? And then how that's then traveled. So when I was in Mexico, I was looking at indigenous teachings from Mexico in particular. So they have the sun and moon dance, which is really interesting. I never got to do it or like see it. It's definitely on my like life list of things that I'd love to observe. Partake in, maybe, who knows, but it's intense. It's like 4 days. It's a commitment.
Right.
It's a real commitment.
You have to do the whole thing.
You have to do the whole thing.
Okay.
It's 4 days. So the moon dance is women only. And the men bang the drums, and they are only allowed to drink water and then have some honey to keep their energy levels going. And they literally dance under the moon for four nights, basically, non-stop. And then no food or anything in between. It's just this like consistent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's like very intense as a ceremony.
Yeah.
And so, that is something that I find fascinating. And also the fact that they separate it into like women for the moon and the feminine energy and that kind of thing. And then they've got the sun dance, which is more the masculine, the fire, the men. They don't get anything. They don't get water, nothing. That's just movement.
Yeah, that's pretty dangerous. That's
crazy under the sun.
Insane. Yeah. Right.
So this is the thing.
People must die.
100%.
Yeah.
Have you heard of vision questing?
Well, no. But I'm familiar with the term. Yeah.
So vision questing I don't know about other cultures, but in Mexico, you literally do it where you get dropped into the wilderness with nothing and you have to survive for 3 days. And so I think that it's really built into their culture, like resilience. Our culture, we're really lacking on resilience.
That's definitely true. Yeah.
And I think that living there and seeing these ceremonies where we would go, oh my God, that's really a lot. They're like, no, like it's not.
Right.
And that's what I always found really interesting, because when you think about stress and how trauma and stress affect the body, when you're resilient, you have quicker recovery and you can cope with more.
Right.
And I really do think that that's what's going on with our society, is like we're too comfortable is the long and short of it. So we're not pushing ourselves to these limits.
People are obsessed with safety.
Absolutely.
Basically.
Absolutely. And actually we need positive stress. One of my best friends, who is just one of my biggest inspirations, she's done a vision quest a couple of times, a few times, because it's a commitment. Once you do it yearly.
Okay.
I'm not sure if she's doing it this year because she had a baby, but
Okay.
that's an okay reason not to. Yeah. But you do have to make this commitment, and then you go back and you do it. And she, went up.
So you're on your own.
You're on your own. You go up into the mountains in Mexico. This is in Mexico, obviously, and they take you to your spot with no camping equipment, no water, no food, no phone, no nothing, and it's you, God, and the elements. And that's it. And you figure it out for 3 days. So obviously for those 3 days, you do fast.
Awesome, I have to say.
Yeah, you fast and you pray.
Right.
And that's what you do. Okay. And then, but again, people, they don't always make it. So it's like these things are not seen as scary. Like one of my, I know, I know. This is the thing. There's like a real genuine like Western thing of like, oh no, that's too much. And the same with the sun dance, where we would go dancing under the sun for that amount of time with no water. How dangerous. And like, yes, biologically there's definitely argument for that, but if you're doing it for these spiritual reasons that these people are doing it for, it's bigger than the body.
They're not just doing it for the first time.
No,
having lived in London for 35 years.
No,
or whatever.
Exactly. Exactly. So then for me, it's like, okay, so we're not going to go to those extremes, and that's totally fine, right? Because we've not grown up with that. That's not our norm. But what's our version then? Because we have to have a version of this. And for me, it's raving. Like, it really is. It's like you stay up all night, you don't eat, you are, drinking water. Like, you're dancing to connect to something bigger than yourself. And I think that for me, that's the fascination, where we've gotten so lost in, first of all, capitalism of now everything has to make X amount of money for it to be a success. And actually it's like, well, did you make people dance? Right. Like, that's the success. Yeah. And then the issue with phones is the next one, where we're not...
It's on my list of things.
Yeah.
To bring up. Go on though.
Well, we're not doing... we're not partaking in what we're there for anymore. Sure. It's, I'm getting content. that's not the point of this. Raving is not content. Like, that's why now people have got videographers to film stuff, which is amazing. We can document it like never before. We don't need your shitty iPhone to do the same thing. Like, you know what I mean? And
just before we get into that,
Yeah.
because I've got a bunch of stuff on that. Can you talk about the sort of neurological side of this and the sort of the way in which repetitive rhythm specifically affects the brain and the nervous system? Because you go into that in the book in an interesting kind of a way.
So it's quite a complex topic, but I'm going to like break it into like very easy.
In layman's terms.
In layman's terms, yeah. So the body responds to external rhythms really well because we're rhythmic. So because we're rhythmic, it means that when we hit external rhythm, you're going to naturally try and sync up with it. So for example, your heart rate is a BPM. So I always find that really interesting because whether you're a DJ or producer or you're a doctor, you're using the same language because it's applicable. So rhythm is literally life force. So when you hear the external rhythm, depending on where your system is at, you're going to respond to it in a really positive way and love it, and it's going to make you want to move with it, or it's going to really put you off because your system's not attuned in that at that speed as such. So that's why genre comes into this conversation, because I know for me, like hardstyle techno, absolutely not a fan. Like, it's just not for me. It's not for my system. I know plenty of people that absolutely love it, whereas they would not love drum and bass.
Right.
And they're the similar kind of tempo.
Sure. And
And they're up in that higher like echelon of tempo, but for my system, it doesn't work.
there is a rhythmic difference though there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's polyrhythms and there's so many things that go on, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, there's a whole digression. But anyway, so there's a phenomenon called rhythmic entrainment. And this is the thing that they've been able to actually prove happens when we hear external rhythms. So obviously that has happened in drum circles from the dawn of humanity through to now dance floors. So we see it. There's this video, I literally posted it, of Sammy Verji at Coachella, where he played to this huge crowd. And on the drop, because obviously he's playing like speed garage, which is just bouncy.
Yeah.
Everyone bounces at the same time. There's a reason for that. Everyone's able to catch that rhythm at the same time because of the entrainment aspect. So then on top of that, there's a co-regulation aspect. So your nervous system is going to go into feeling, into that regulated state, which means that you're not in a fight, flight, freeze response. Your nervous system is basically in that rest, digest, you're comfortable, you're present, etc. It's also called social engagement. So that means you're sociable and you're able to engage socially.
Sure.
And so music has the impact, rhythmic music has the impact to make that happen, especially if the movement is alongside the actual rhythm itself. I think that what's really fascinated me about this, breaking down all of this and researching all of this, is the fact that music therapy and dance therapy are two separate degrees, which to me is mad.
Right.
Because I personally think you have to have the movement.
Got it.
So you can hear something, but you're going to just sit and like do this and just like tap your foot or your hand, especially if you're musically aligned, I guess, and
Sure.
you're really in that zone. There are some people that are maybe not so much, and that's not really like where they naturally go to. And there are also conflictions to this. There are people, for example, with neurodivergence who are not going to necessarily respond to the same stimuli. It's a spectrum. It's always a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think rhythm is a spectrum.
Right.
That's my belief system.
Explain that.
So if you said, okay, cool, you've just got like a 4/4 rhythm, right? And you're like clap to that. Hopefully majority of people will be able to clap on that exact beat, because that's what their body is responding to. But there are going to be people that are not going to be able to do that because their system is not wired in that regard. They're responding to it in a slightly different capacity. That doesn't mean they don't have rhythm. It means their rhythm is on a spectrum, and that what they're feeling is also on that spectrum. And so they're responding in the only way they know how. That's how the body responds. Because when you tap your foot, you're not thinking about doing it.
Sure.
It's a complete natural reflex. So that's why I always find the whole conversation on rhythm really interesting and also really funny, because there are loads of factors about rhythm. It's not, this white guy has no rhythm. Like, that's not how it works.
You're saying that clapping on the 1 and the 3 isn't necessarily a bad thing?
No.
Okay.
Not necessarily.
Some white people out there will be happy to hear that.
Yeah, not necessarily. It just means that maybe music production's not your thing, which is fine.
Okay.
It just means that maybe, it just doesn't mean that you don't have rhythm. Your internal and external rhythms are just syncing up slightly differently. It's all valid, because as long as we're finding a rhythm, it means you're alive. It means your system is going to come back to baseline. It means your system is going to come back to normal, basically. And that's basically what we're searching for. You know, people are searching for meditation practices that they have to, I've done it, sat in silence for 10 days. No, like, for me, that was the worst thing I could have done. And I'm really glad that I did it.
Okay.
But at the same time,
I've been wanting to do one of those.
I'd highly recommend it. I think that everyone should try and do it. It's a really great achievement.
Sure.
And the reason that it's so good for you is because, as well, it allows you to actually still do the movement without moving. So the whole practice of Vipassana is literally moving, basically feeling an energy up and down the body. Yeah. So that is applicable also in music and dance. It's just done in a slightly different way. But at the time, like, me sitting down, I did it whilst I was in treatment. Like, in 2019, I did this Vipassana, like, sat on the floor for 12 hours a day meditating. Yeah. It's like, it was
at the best of times.
Yeah, I should have just been on the dance floor. Like, I would have got so much more out of that. So anyway, yeah, rhythm is essential to human life. And so if you're getting your phone out on the dance floor, you're disrupting not only your rhythm, but you're also then disrupting everyone's around you, because it's automatically, just because of the way that phones flash up and what they do and what they are, is going to break somebody out of that rhythmic loop. And the nervous system is a sensory motor system. So you've got a sensory motor loop going on. So basically what that means is that your senses, so we've got sound, of course, for the music. And then we've also got other things, you know, the smells, the taste, the like sight and what you're seeing. Everything is affecting your nervous system's response to the present moment. So you've then got the motor side, the movement side as well. And this thing is like looping together, especially when you're dancing, which then brings you into either alpha, and that's your brain waves, going into that like calm, relaxed brainwave state, or even better is theta, which is the meditation state, or the state that we go into brainwave wise when we dream. Right. So theta is great because it's where your conscious and unconscious mind are bridged. And when that happens, you can go into a really amazing emotional process. And so anything that you're not even aware of that has been like affecting you, you will literally just process it. And you're processing it through the movement and also through the music for the sensory aspect. And it just is, it's a beautiful loop. It's a really great loop. Phone, loop broken. Right. And that's the issue. That is the issue. And I'm not saying...
So this is the scientific justification.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely legit. And I think to people it feels intuitive, right? Mm-hmm. Like, honestly, I think there's no... I mean, you know, there's a kind of reflexive reaction against people complaining about phones. And it has become a bit of a kind of like... it's become a bit of a cliche to complain about it.
Yeah.
But, you know...
It's valid.
The science is on our side here.
Yeah, it is valid. And I think that I haven't, you know... This is my theory from what I've learned about the system, and there needs to be a lot more research into this. I think this is such a new concept. But in terms of what I know about music and dance on the dance floor in particular, and how it takes you away, that is a problem. And yeah, I'm not saying don't film 10 seconds to just do a little clip and be like, I was there. Do what you want, you know, like just be mindful of it. That's the
I would discourage people from doing that, by the way, but
so would I. I think that what it comes down to is people being genuinely conscious about the experience that they're trying to have. Like, I went to a show on Saturday. It was an amazing show. It was Gets, and literally the guy that was on before, like hyping the crowd up, was like, he's about to come out, everyone get your phones out. And I was like, what are we doing? No. And it was just so funny to like see that this is now part of our culture and society. Yeah. And I get it, but there is also this necessity to put some I guess, education behind why this is so important to talk about. It's not just, oh, it's ruining the vibe. That, sure, that's a conversation point, but if we can actually add in, this is what it's doing to the body.
It's ruining the vibe for this scientific reason.
Yeah,
empirically proven scientific reason.
Absolutely, right? And I think that's essential because then you really start to get a wider idea of how important and sacred dance floors are and why people have been drawn to them forever. Like, this is not a new phenomenon, you know?
Yep. Which brings us to the unfortunate sort of conflation of raving and dance music and this whole kind of communion thing with drugs. Now, I mean, drugs, well, we've had all kinds of problems on the YouTube channel about talking about drugs and it getting us banned, but I have been historically, and I still feel very strongly that ecstasy in particular is actually quite a positive thing for people to do. And what you talk about in the book actually is, I mean, you don't quite put it like this, but it's the wrong kind of drugs.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Basically.
Right? So talk to me about this.
Yeah, I would agree with this. And we can see this now anyway. Like MDMA, there's loads of trials about it being used in trauma therapy. Yeah. It's been used in many, many ways for positive results and to get people from A to B.
Yeah.
And this is where rave culture started. Like, you know, it was ecstasy, it was dance floors, it was people, and that was it. It wasn't G, it wasn't ketamine, it wasn't, can I say all of this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It wasn't...
As long as you don't tell people to do it.
No, definitely not. It wasn't cocaine. And this is...
Totally. And actually the periods in which people have a negative... sort of looking at it historically, the bad periods are always the periods where people start doing coke,
100%.
Right? Like coke ruined disco and coke, ruined various other things along the way. Yeah, absolutely.
100%,
yeah.
Because it's not that type of drug. Like,
totally.
That's not where I think that we should be putting our focus in if we're on a dance floor. It's like cocaine is just an ego exemplifier. Like, it's not the drug that's like, oh, I love you. No. MDMA is.
Yeah.
It's a molecule that literally provides love. And I think that that's what is...
Yeah, it's like a massive empathy boost, isn't it?
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
And that's where people get this connection from. And I think that with my work, and I talk about this in the book, I'm not telling people to go sober. Like, if you want to go sober, that's up to you. That's not my body of work or what I'm trying to achieve. Because I've got amazing friends of mine who have been through their own journeys and they don't do anything else, but once a month or something they will go out and they'll do a pill and that's their thing. And they let go. I personally am in a position of sobriety because of my health. Like, I've got no interest in whatever, maybe, dabble here and there in a mushroom, but apart from that, like, it's not something that I'm interested in. So I think that for me, I can see all these ends of the spectrum about where people lie on this. And I think that it's about understanding what escapism you're trying to achieve. Right. Because if you're going to an event and you are like, I'm going to take a pill and I'm going to go through this like catharsis because I'm really stressed, and that enhances your experience, that's beautiful, good for you. If you're going and you're like, I need to escape from my life, then that's a problem.
Yeah, that says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a massive problem. And I think that it really is very individual. I think that that's a very individual process. I'm also not an addiction expert. Like, I can't speak on any of that. So what I can speak on is, the wrong types of drugs on the dance floor because of how they're being used. So as we mentioned, in indigenous settings, using psychedelics to enhance is something that does happen. Yeah. Ayahuasca being one of them. There's a tribe, well, not even a tribe, that's the wrong word. There's a religion in Brazil called Umbanda. Okay. So Umbanda was formed after the slave trade, and it is a mix of West African tradition where they pray to the orishas, and then also Catholicism, and then also indigenous Brazilian teachings. Okay. And they bring ayahuasca into the ceremony, but the centerpiece of this ceremony, and not always, but the centerpiece of this ceremony is the drums, and they all wear white and they do these kind of like twirls, and it's all very beautiful. Okay. And I asked the question when I met these women that were facilitating this, like, do you do ayahuasca all the time? Like, is it an essential component? And they said no.
Right.
So it was actually about the drums and the music. But if they wanted to enhance that, where people would go through like a very deep cathartic process, they would bring ayahuasca in. And I'm like, cool, that to me makes sense, because that's basically MDMA. It's a really similar concept.
Right.
I want to enhance my experience, not this is the experience. Right. And I think that that's a really important thing to take away from electronic music. You're enhancing the experience, not that's all it is.
Yeah, the image of the whole thing has been like the media very early on had a negative portrayal of it, right? And it was there in the kind of headlines in The Sun from the late 80s, and the kind of like reflexive negative reaction that tabloid journalists tend to have. It's a kind of Middle England kind of thing, but lots of countries have their own version of it, right?
Totally.
It's a kind of like more pseudo-moralistic reaction against what I guess the suspicion that people are having too much of a good time or something.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's done, well, it absolutely has done real damage to people's perception of it. And I think particularly, I've had this conversation on the show before, like particularly in the UK, it's very much seen as a kind of young person's thing, right? And you're out of it by 24 or whatever. And that is, I think, I mean, it's slightly, the picture is slightly different in Europe. People go on slightly longer in Europe, like slightly older. But even then, it's like, and I just think, and this is, a lot of it is bound up in the perception that this is something that you go out and get wasted.
Totally.
And that to me is an incomplete picture at best, right, of this thing. So
it is incomplete. And I think that it also just puts everyone into the same box and in the same, paints everyone in the same light, that, oh, you go out to that, therefore. And I, even when I was working in music and I would say, oh, I work in electronic music or whatever, people would always just assume like, oh, you must be an absolute caner.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm genuinely not, like I'm sober.
All right.
Because I was obviously going through this mad health situation.
Yeah.
And that's not the reason, I just was an athlete when I was younger. I didn't even dabble in drugs until I was probably about 20, 21. I've been raving for a long time before any of that, and like, even then it never was the experience for me personally, ever. It was like I would be the half a pill and I'm good kind of thing. And so that is
these
like,
days that sounds like quite a lot, to be honest.
Yeah.
But no, absolutely. I mean, I was not quite as well behaved, I say, in my younger years. But even with that context, I mean, as I've obviously I was a raver when I was a kid, was able to go pro, as it were, not until I was 27.
Sure.
So I then spent, my late 20s and the whole of my 30s as a touring DJ. And, that's a very different relationship with the music, right?
Totally.
And towards the end of that period, I started to play less and started to realize as I played less that I was losing touch with it all. So I started to go out a bit more just to have a dance. And it was really only in that period that I really fully sort of connected with what you're saying, basically, because when I was a kid I just took a load of pills, which is absolutely fine, but then as someone in your kind of late 30s, early 40s, you can, with a slightly different perspective, have the same experience but in a different way and get just as much, if not more, from it, right? And that's surely attainable at any age, right?
Absolutely. I think that it also comes down to culture.
Yes.
Because culturally, you were in the norm of it all. Like, this is normal. You go out, take a pill, blah, 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 blah. That's normal. If we're in this zone now where trends are changing anyway, young people are not going out as much. They're definitely not drinking. They're not taking as many drugs, etc., etc. Like, the trends are changing anyway, right? So there's a massive shift because of, I think COVID had a massive impact on people's perception of health. Which I think has then impacted the fact that people assume going out, taking drugs, drink, rave culture is all this like one big thing, which is why they're not entering into it anymore. When we were younger, that was well, of course I'm going to go do that. Like that's what everyone's doing.
We didn't take our health that seriously.
No. Like now you're checking the labels on a supplement packet, but back then you're just like, yeah, sure, whatever. Sure. And I think that these shifts and changes are reflective of how people are consuming music and going out now. But what's replaced pills and drugs is the phones.
Right.
That's the shift.
That's not a good trade.
No,
in my opinion.
It's not. Of course it's not. And this is the thing. It's like, we're dealing with a new issue rather than focusing in. I mean, the conversation around drugs and alcohol in dance music will forever continue. Like this is never going to change, and that's totally fine. What I think is important is to give people some concise education. You know, if you're doing cocaine, this is what it's actually going to do to your system. We can sit here all day long and try and police it. It's never going to work. So it's a case of, okay, cool, this is what it's actually going to do to your system. It's not going to allow you to complete X cycle. It's going to enhance this and blah, blah, blah. That's personally how I think we should approach this, especially with ravers. In addiction, as I said, it's not my area, but with ravers, I think this is necessary. I also think that this is where I talk about G in the book. It's like that upgrade. It's like the margin is so small for overdose with G. It's like you're really, really dabbling on like a really dangerous precipice there. And again, it's just not, it's culturally acceptable, right?
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is that we've entered into a culture of just being like, like hedonism is the norm and best thing ever. And it's like, if we can bring it back to the music, which is what you found through your journey, then hedonism is not a byproduct, it's a choice. And I think that that's the key, because I'm not telling people to, no, you can't have pleasure, like you can't do any of this. No. And again, it's just not my mission. My mission is about educating people on the facts. This does this is how this works, blah, blah, blah. And now, guess what? You have a choice. And now maybe you also want to change your relationship and your thought process around your consumption. And that includes with music, and that also includes with food and drugs and sex and everything else, you know? So these things all fit into the same bracket, in my opinion. Totally. It's always about education.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So tell me about reclaiming nightclubs and raving and that sort of the physical side of the dance music kind of infrastructure.
Well, I think that clubs are amazing community hubs, and I think that we've built them on this premise of they're used 2 nights a week, maybe.
Maybe 3 if you're lucky.
Yeah, 3 if you're lucky, and that's it. And people were filling up clubs, right? They're not anymore. That's in the stats. So all the work that's going in at the moment into, helping nightlife and the government and policies and blah, 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 it's like, well, why don't we change what we're using them for? And there are clubs that are already doing this. Fabric being one of them, Ministry of Sound. There are these club spaces that are opening the doors to events or things that are of community. I'm like, we need to just have it every day, and this needs to be normal. Because if you look at somewhere like Jamaica and sound system culture, it's just, well, we've got here, this is where we're doing it on the street. Right. This is fine. This is all how it works. We're in this zone where our society runs in a way of policy, it runs in a way of noise restrictions and blah, 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 and all these things. So why are we not putting stuff into club spaces that it encourages community, it encourages music, it encourages all these things that these spaces should just be used for? And I think that with what I do with MIM and the company and everything we do, I train instructors in my methodology. So the methodology that I created off the back of this whole health journey, I've got movement is medicine as a method. And then I'm working on music as medicine, so that's kind of separate, but that's really what comes under MIM.
Sure.
And I believe that movement is medicine should be not just as a singular, there could be loads of other stuff, but obviously this is my work. I believe that I built it for club spaces.
Right.
It works in club spaces. I started it on Zoom, started it on Instagram, I started it on social media. When I had it in mind, it was big, loud sound systems. It wasn't yoga studios. It wasn't gyms. It was clubs.
Things which are there and are not used for the vast majority of the time, right?
It's already there. Yeah. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to build it. It's already in existence. And
let me just give you the sort of devil's advocate argument, sort of not against it, but like the kind of caveat is that it's non-trivial expense to open these places, right? And have them
Totally.
going, just, you know, for people to, you know, do stuff in. Like, there's all sorts of regulation, there's staff required. Like, how do you respond to?
Oh, totally. This has
Such
been my biggest issue.
Okay.
In my head, I was like, oh, I've got this thing. I'll just obviously contact all of the people I know, because I know loads of promoters and people. And then it's like, we have to cover this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, respect, like, I totally get that. So where is the middle ground? Because if we're opening these spaces up and we can't afford to do it, there has to be government funding.
Right.
It's that simple. So I'm having to fill out the million of pages of lottery funding and arts
Really?
council and
Okay.
whatever to even try and get the event side of things up and running, because promoters are like, the ones that get it are amazing. Like Bruno, who runs Number 90, he was so like, have the venue, like, totally love what you're doing. That for me is like, it's a starting point. It's like, I want to be able to implement this into as many different spaces, not just in the UK either. Like, you know, there's so many spaces that we could do this within.
Yeah.
And what it takes though is a coming together. It's, at the moment, there's a lot of separate conversations going on. So I think government funding is definitely one of them, but also sponsorship.
Right. Like,
Sponsorship is a no-brainer. I think that for me, it's been interesting having my career and knowing, you know, this is how sponsorship works, this is how brand deals work, and blah blah blah. I'm very lucky in that I understand all of that concept. If you don't understand that concept and you're running stuff at a loss, then it's all going to be a problem. But I also know that by the conversations that I've had, that sponsorship is a really solid way to bring the promoter side of things together, the brand side of things together, and activation side of things together, and then this side of things together with the music.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose again, the sort of devil's advocate side will be to say that, or to just to point out that, you know, and going back to the image of the whole thing, it's often drinks brands, right?
Totally.
That do these sponsorship deals, and you know, and to, you know, just go back to the economic side of it for a moment. These venues are often basically reliant on selling booze.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
They're basically the business is selling booze, basically.
Exactly.
Like, that's how it works.
Yeah,
right?
because they're not making money. And so if they're opening it for this regard, there's no making money on the bar.
Yeah.
And so that's
So
a
it's
problem.
it's a completely different business model, really.
Completely new business model. I was not aware, I don't think. I was quite naive when I went into these conversations, being like, but duh. And then they're like, no, but
but
no.
but money.
Exactly. But also, we're going to be operating at a loss, right? And for X reason and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, cool. Let me think about it then. So I was running events all the way for the last like 2 years solidly. I did the cause, and then I had a residency at Number 90. And then in January, we did Box Park Wembley. And it was in January where I could have continued trying to, you know, push it into venues and push and push and push. And I thought, no, just stop and come up with a better strategy that is for all of these venues. Like, instead of trying to do individual conversations, because as I said, I know a lot of promoters, right? And a lot of them are my friends, and we've all having the same conversations, which is this: we have to make money on the bar and we have to do this. If you can get a sponsor, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, cool, I'm going to come up and figure out a new way that we can figure out a new business model, because if you can put that business model into one club and it works as a beta, you can do it into all clubs in the UK.
Sure.
And then suddenly we've got something that is sustainable. We've got something that helps with like government policy in regards to, you can't close this venue because it's doing X, Y, Z for people's health.
Yeah, right.
And that's the stuff I think that we need to flip this into, and where electronic music is going to be essential in changing the narratives that we have around nightlife and the way in which the government gives no support to it. And people like Mike at the NTIA are working so hard to change that. But I think that electronic music, from a health perspective, when we bring this narrative in, it will genuinely be a lot more difficult to close clubs and remove funding. Like, I really do, at my soul level, believe that.
Yeah, and that's like, you know, such a pernicious effect, which is just, I mean, it's done so much damage to the scene, the industry, the whole thing, not just in the UK, basically all across the world, right? I mean, it's because that's the infrastructure of the whole thing, right? Clubs are the infrastructure
Absolutely.
of it. And it used to be that, you know, recording studios played a big part, and the recording studios are gone, and, you know, the clubs are just crucial
They're essential. And that's it. It's like, well, what are we going to do if everything does shut down? Where are we going? Because this has to exist somewhere. And I think that like one of my most interesting points of focus for that was Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
Because Saudi had no music infrastructure up until 5 years ago. And now, well, it's because it was banned. Music was haram.
Let's not get into that particular thing here.
But yeah, so I went over there 2 years ago to this huge music conference, and I was like, where did you go before though? Did you leave the country? Like, what was the deal? And they were like, no, we went to the desert.
Right.
Like, they can't police that. The exact same thing will happen here. If all clubs end up closing because we're not putting in proper infrastructure and budgets and money and everything else to ensuring that these spaces are essential community spaces, it will go underground again. It will go into fields. It will go into free parties. It just will.
It's full circle, yeah. Because I mean, that's something that's been talked about. Really interesting thing. The kind of unintended consequence of the Criminal Justice Act of 1994, which actually led to a huge amount of investment going into clubs. Actually, so had they tried to kill it, but actually what they did was actually really strengthen the underlying infrastructure of the whole thing.
Absolutely. And also, can we go back to that? Because for me, that bill, the fact that they use the terminology repetitive beats, they know. They just do.
Right.
Sorry. There's
or at least
no
there's
way.
some intuition somewhere, right?
Someone somewhere has said, because why not just music? The wording repetitive beats in particular is why it's hypnosis. They know that when people are dancing in sync, in rhythm, there's a hypnosis going on. So you're able, if you're spreading love and that everyone's connected, then what happens? All societal issues go out the window. There's no race war, there's no gender war, there's no issue with anything anymore. People don't care what you do for a living because you're in the same hypnosis, and it's a really positive one, right? Versus the hypnosis that we're given by the news, or look at the news. The BBC, it's a repetitive rhythm, when they're trying to tell you
the news cycle to cycle, isn't it?
Exactly. So this for me, I'm not, I don't want to get into like conspiracies, but in terms of like that word, I always found it fascinating that word repetitive beats was in an actual bill to, change the infrastructure of electronic music.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to finish up by talking about therapy in particular. We had a really interesting conversation on the show with Tom Middleton, who is amongst other things, into very much the kind of music therapy guy, and he talked us through some of the different functions that have been designed to do this. So just talk to me a little bit about your side of this, what you do, and what you do, how it overlaps with all that stuff.
Well, I think that as I said earlier, music therapy has its place, and I write about this massively, but we can also empower ourselves to know that music is wellness. Right? I think, again, it depends on what you're listening to, and you have to be really conscious of that. So there are certain things such as lyrics that are going to be more damaging, but this is why I love electronic music, because there's not a lot of lyric in there. It's really quite simple for people to pick up on the structure or the science actually of music. There is a real science to music in electronic, I believe, just based on the way production works. Like, there are certain songs that people are going to love and remember forever because the pattern of it is quite simplistic, and that's what your body loves and your brain loves, and you don't need to go and sit in a therapy room to achieve that. You can just get that on your headphones. And so for me, it's a case of how do we educate people as best as possible. It's not to replace anything, and there are people who need music therapy interventions. Great. Why didn't I get offered that? Why would any Tom, Dick, Harry, like, there's a very specific group of people that are being offered music therapy. For me, this needs to just be normal. Like, everything needs to be normalized. Everything needs to be accessible. Everything needs to be part of life. And I will tell you this story because this is actually where, even back before I got into any of this, where I realized like how disconnected we actually are from this as a concept. So before working in music for a year or two, I was a TA. So I work with special needs kids.
Oh, okay. That kind of TA, right?
Yeah. TA, yeah. Yeah, not territorial army. Teaching assistant. So I work with kids specifically with ADHD. That was I'm quite high energy. And so they were like, you'd be great. So there was this one boy, I will never forget him. He had such severe ADHD to the point of like backflipping. Right. And bear in mind, this is over 10 years ago. This is like nearly 15 years ago. So this is before it was over diagnosed, over medicated, etc. If you had ADHD, you really had like a real solid diagnosis. Right. And he had so much energy, super bright, but his parents were amazing, and they had drumming as an intervention for him. So he was an amazing drummer. I
think that's actually quite common in the history of drummers, actually.
Yeah. Amazing drummer. Right. Had to get it out, right? The energy. So I found this out. He'd been drumming since he was 3. He was like 13. And so I used to sit with him in maths. And the teacher that he was he did not really get how to teach him. Right. There are good teachers, there are great teachers, and then there are teachers that are book teachers. And he was a book teacher, God bless him. So he didn't really understand how to work with him. So I was like, cool, what we're going to do, because you just don't get on, this boy couldn't stand this teacher. Right. So I was like, what we're going to do is I'm going to take you down to the music room and you're going to drum for 10 minutes. You're going to get it all out, all your aggression towards this guy. And then we're going to go off and we're going to finish. And he was like, cool, I'm on it. And I'm working in like an inner city London school. Like we had like unit in there. Like it's not kids that are just like, oh yes, okay. Like you're really having to.
You get some pushback sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. But he was like, cool, I'm on it. And I was like, right, great. So we went down to the music room, and that was like a solid thing that I was doing with him for probably a couple of months. And then I get called into a meeting by my boss, who was like, what do you think you're doing? And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, why are you taking him to drum during maths? He needs to do maths. And I was like, but he doesn't like the teacher and he won't sit still and he's throwing chairs. So I think this is a much better solution. And they were like, you can't do that. You don't have the jurisdiction to like do that at all. Drumming is a treat. And it was that moment that I was like, what are you on about? Like, obviously my method is working. And so
he was improved when he took him back. Yeah.
We had a deal. Go and get rid of everything you want to get rid of on the drum kit. Come back and you sit and you focus and you do your work. What did he do? Every single time he did his work. It was never an issue. So this for me was always like fascinating, because I was just like, the school system even is not set up to encourage music as a form of release or therapy.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
In any way, shape or form. And so if we're in a classroom and everyone is, even taking it back to this, China, in between certain lessons and in like the morning time and whatever, because China, they do Tai Chi, they understand energy, they understand movement. They play really fast-paced movement for the kids, and the kids all get up and they do these dance moves and then they sit down and they work. We're literally getting kids into a classroom and we're like, sit still for 6 hours. Yeah. It's not going to work. I can't sit still for 20 minutes. Like, that's just not possible.
Yeah, they barely even do sport anymore, do they?
Not at all. Yeah. So we're taking all this stuff away, and then we're saying to people, okay, cool, now you go and be an adult. And it's like, well, I've got anxiety, I've got depression at the age of 12, I've got, all these things. And it's like, so music therapy as an intervention, it's not an intervention, it needs to be part of life. And like, this is the biggest issue that we've got in our society, is we're boxing stuff into essential and non-essential. Right. My belief system, and not even just my belief system, my whole body of work is to prove music and dance are not lifestyle things. They are essential components of human existence, basically. So yeah.
The book is called Music is Medicine. It is there. I'll grab it and show it to the camera.
That's it.
Out next week?
Yeah, next week, yeah. Just doing the final
in the show notes to it.
Final edits and whatnot. But yeah, it's going to be on Amazon. I'm self-publishing, so all support is welcome. Right. And yeah, you can do it in paperback or ebook. So yeah, thanks for the support.
Thanks for your time, Emma. It's been great.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Nice one.
Music, not diving, with Scuba.